leaving the timer on because it's going to be my time check since I'm here alone during this pandemic. All right, it's 2:00 and welcome to everyone who registered and is here to listen to this webinar on how to solicit feedback during a crisis. Now, the truth is these strategies work every time and they are applicable every time, including the so-called normal times. However, we know that during this pandemic, we have to pay extra attention to those talent development moments that have the ability to shift our experience and impact our career. And so all of these things that we will talk about today are even more important for us to follow up with during this pandemic. Before I get into detail, I want to go over what the Belonging Project is for those of you who don't know. The Belonging Project is a national collaborative between Saifa Shaw and several national organizations, including bar associations and organizations that are dedicated and committed to advancing diversity and inclusion in the profession. And we've come together to create a resource so that diverse law students and diverse lawyers who are impacted by the pandemic can have an opportunity to get professional development, personal development, mental health and wellness resources that they need. And so this webinar series is part of what we plan to offer throughout the lifetime of this initiative. We will have webinars in 3 strands of topics: 1 for law students, 2nd for diverse lawyers, and 3rd for leaders, so that we can increase and improve our inclusive leadership skills. And so this series is Thriving as a Diverse Professional. It's for diverse lawyers, but we believe law students would also benefit. And we also believe that leaders will benefit from this, because as we talk about what we should be doing as diverse lawyers to get the feedback that we need, leaders will also hear what it is that we typically do wrong. So let's jump in, because we only have 30 minutes and 10 minutes for questions. So there are a multitude of situations where we get feedback that is ineffective, incomplete, insufficient, all right? Some of those situations include things like when the evaluation is soft. So soft evaluations or soft feedback is when someone is giving you feedback. They're giving you information about how you are doing or how you're engaging with the environment, but they don't tell you the whole truth. They don't tell you everything that it is that you need to know. And the reason that often happens, or the reasons that people articulate that they do that, is, well, I was worried that as a woman she would begin to cry, or I don't want to be accused of being racist. And so people have these excuses that they give, but soft evaluations is where someone's not really telling you everything that you need to know. Imagine that you have a circle of information that you need to know, and they only tell you what's on the outskirts. So that's an example of soft evaluations. Vague and broad feedback is something that's actually very, very common, where we go ahead and we give people feedback, but we don't give them enough specifics. The problem with vague feedback and broad feedback is that sometimes we think we have everything we know or that we need to know. So someone may say, you do not come off very confident, or I need you to be more assertive, or worse, your writing skills need to improve. But they don't give you specifics in ways that you need to improve. They don't give specifics in the kind of behavior that they're expecting to see. And so without that, you fill in the blanks of what you think you need to be doing, right? You may be working on improving your writing and you think you've improved, but they have a certain image and certain behaviors and values that they're looking for. And you come back and find out that you're not on the same page. No feedback is also very common, especially in legal. We have many attorneys who have problems giving feedback. And unfortunately, despite what we do, studies indicate that we actually don't like anything we perceive as confrontation. Now, I'll tell you it's problematic that we even think about giving feedback, especially constructive feedback, as confrontation, but that is the reality. And so what sometimes happens is you just don't get any feedback. Or when you ask for feedback, you get the kind of feedback like when we go to restaurants and we're not exactly satisfied with our food, and the waiter comes by and says, "So, how is your dinner?" And we say, "Oh, it's good," when we know it's not good. And we know that we plan to probably not go back. Now, some of us are more honest and would say, there's a problem with my food, but unfortunately, a lot of times we don't offer that whole, complete, truthful feedback. And this happens in the workplace as well. Now, the last one is one that I see derail a lot of careers. And often it happens when it's too late to fix. For example, somebody shows up, it's now the year that they're up for partner, and now they're being told that you're not eligible this year, even though you thought you were, and even though all along we've told you this is your partner year because you haven't done A, B, C, D. So these are the kind of situations that we will address today. Now, understand that the problems with feedback range from these interpersonal situations, which are based on a lack of skill, based on communication skills. But problems with feedback can also be systemic. They can be systemic in the sense that the criteria that's being used has been written so broadly that people bring their subjective experiences to it. And that subjective experience and those subjective lenses are influenced by culture, they're influenced by experience, they're influenced by socioeconomic status, and they're influenced by bias. Other problematic things are when the process itself lends itself to a particular normative lens that maybe is white, male, heterosexual, able-bodied. And so even the process itself has embedded within it bias issues and cultural fluency issues. Now, we're going to address those situations and how they impact feedback and how they may be getting in the way of you getting good feedback, as well as strategies to navigate that. But that will be part 2, which will be in 2 weeks from today. So let's keep going. I'm going to introduce you to Michelle. Michelle is bright. She's amazing. Everybody who's interviewed her has thought that she just has so much potential. Now, Michelle is a Black female attorney. She's a first-year associate at a large law firm. She also happens to be first-generation professional. While her parents worked hard and they worked hard to get her through school, they were not lawyers and they did not work in a profession that was corporate-like. And so she's the first in her family to be in this position. Michelle also comes from a culture that is a bit more direct. And so when you look at cultural differences, you have people who come from cultures that are more indirect versus direct. She also comes from a culture that is pretty expressive. And so when she does express herself, she uses a lot more animation, body movement, and expression. And finally, she's also from a culture that's deferential and hierarchical to people who are in authority and people who are older. So you've met Michelle. Now here's the scenario that Michelle is in. I'm sorry, let me go back. During this conversation, we're going to talk about 7 takeaways, and they're about asking for feedback, creating an analysis scheme for yourself, being an investigator, converting your supervisors to strategic advisors, clarifying, using translators, and focusing on the mindset that you bring. So let's dive deeper into these. So Michelle's a first year, and one of the partners that she works with the most really doesn't give her feedback. She gets the work product, she gives the work assignment, she gives him the work product, she doesn't hear back from him. And when she goes to ask him for information, he's not always very responsive, or she walks away not really knowing. So what I would advise Michelle to do as a starting point is to think through 3 priorities that will filter and shape her engagement with this partner. 1, think about relationship building, because one of the most important things that impacts our careers in our organizations is the relationships that we build with the people that we work with. And so what Michelle wants to know is, what do I need to know about this partner, how they work, how they prefer information, so that I can meet their needs? Now, the reason she's doing this is because if you think about what feedback is your environment, the people that you're working with, giving you information on how you're interacting with them. And so you will hear some teachers say, feedback is never about you, it's always about the person giving feedback. And in a sense, they're right, because what they're saying is the person giving you feedback is giving you information about their expectations, their values, how they expect your work product to be. Now, in truth, it is also about you, because if you don't meet the expectations of those who have the power to evaluate you and promote you and give you opportunities, then it's very much about you as well. The second thing that Michelle should be factoring into her approach with this partner is visibility. Having this partner get to know her, having this partner have her top of mind, and having this partner think of her as someone who's in the line of streams of his communication, as well as developmentally rich opportunities. And as part of this transition and working in a new environment with a new team, part of her goals should be approaching him in a way that is about honing her emotional intelligence as it pertains to the relationship between the two of them. So one of the things that Michelle has to do if the partner is not giving feedback is to go ask the partner for feedback. How am I doing? How was this brief I worked on for you? Did this meet your expectations? Now, in some situations, you'll get the answer. You may get the partner who says, actually, this needed a lot of work. I had to redo it substantively in ABC way. Or this actually took me multiple drafts to finish because the first draft you gave me, the final draft you gave me, your final draft, was so off point from what I wanted. Or the partner may say, actually, your work product was very good. It's exactly what I would have expected for someone who's a first-year associate. In fact, it's excellent work product. You're right on. There's a word I'm looking for. You're right on track. Okay. Those are the things that could happen. Or the partner may not tell her anything. The partner may be like many people are in restaurants when you ask how was it and they say, oh, it was good. But maybe the partner never gave you the drafts back. So between what you gave the partner and what got filed or what got submitted to the client or what got finalized, you didn't see what happened in between. So one of the things that you can do, and this is the second strategy, is begin to engage in a comparison analysis. Now, there's so many things that should happen in a specific way, but this webinar is talking about what we can do when the things that should happen in a specific way don't happen. So in an ideal world, partners will give effective feedback and they'll give good feedback and we will all understand what they're saying. We will understand what they need and we will walk away with specific behaviors and specific expectations and we will know how we're being measured. But that's not how it works for most of us, which is why these feedback authors keep publishing great books out there. So you can take the work product between what you did and what the partner did and compare. And be looking for things. Is this a substantive change? Is this stylistic? And think through the changes. And if there are changes that you don't understand, use that as an opportunity to go back and utilize the first strategy, which is you go back to the partner, schedule a time ahead of time, especially if they're busy, and tell them that I want to meet with you to go through what you've done. I saw the improvements and changes you made to this brief. I want to make sure that the next time you give me a project that I can better meet your expectations and I want to continue to grow and learn from you. And then you go through and you say, I noticed you did this here. Why did you change that? And not why did you change that as in, why did you change that? But more in a posture of curiosity, a posture of relationship building, a posture of emotional intelligence. Now, what I've learned in my career is that people like to share information. And when you give them the opportunity to show you why what they did is better than what you did, they'll be willing to do that. Okay? So think through the changes, follow up with a discussion, have a growth mindset, a mindset that I can always continue to grow and learn and be better. But you have to be willing to be vulnerable and you have to be willing to open yourself up to that. Now, let's fast forward. Michelle's worked through this with that partner. They have a great working relationship. She's now a third-year associate, and she gets put on a matter where she's working with a high-profile partner, a high-profile client, and she's never worked with this partner before. So even though she has a solid background, this partner decides to put her on her matters. Let's make this partner she. Put her on her matters because she's heard great things. But this partner is so busy that she does poorly with feedback. So not only is Michelle learning a new person and their style and their preferences, but now she's also having to come up with a new technique on how to get information. So let's assume that Michelle has already done the other two techniques that we've discussed, and that didn't work. Well, here's a third technique. Investigate this partner. What are their preferences? How do they prefer to get their work done? Talk to other associates. Talk to junior partners who've worked with this partner. What do they say? Find out who this partner's star associate is. Look at that person's work. If the person is willing to meet with you, have a meeting and say, I am working with partner Corey for the first time. I'd love it if you could give me some tips on how to work best with that person. I can tell you that when I lateraled over to my second firm, associates had candid conversations about various partners. He likes it this way, he likes it that way. Even though we go to all these writing classes and they tell us to stop using these difficult Latin words that nobody uses in regular language, he wants the wheretofore and heretofore and all of that in all of his pleading. So when you're working for him, this is how it needs to be. And so you can get a lot of information from other people if you are willing to reach out, but you have to be strategic and you have to make sure you're asking the right people. In other words, don't be asking the associates who this partner no longer works with because they don't do good work, okay? So that's strategy number 3. Now, strategy number 4 is where you go a step further and you begin to convert this partner from just somebody that you work with, somebody that you deliver work to, into someone who's a strategic advisor in your career. So let's say Michelle now has gotten this information about this partner and knows what this partner likes and has heard about that. Now Michelle can go back to this partner, and when they have changes in the work product, or when they get feedback, but the feedback is vague or it's incomplete, Michelle can say, what would you do if you were working on this project? When you were a third-year associate, how would you have approached this project? You can find informal situations where you can talk to your partners about their favorite associates and what it was they liked about those associates. And you can talk to them about their career journey and the things that they learned at different phases. Now, when you're doing that, what you're doing is you're having a conversation with them about them. But what you're learning is about how they think, how they process, what they value, and how they would approach things. Now, why is this important? No matter how objective we try to be, and no matter how much effort we put into being inclusive and recognizing other styles and other ways of being, we also have a natural affinity bias for people who do things like us. Now, I'm not suggesting conformity. What I am saying is what a partner told me when I lateraled over to a new firm. What he said is, the way you've been doing this for years before you moved to our firm is not wrong, but I have my way that I do things. And when you work with partner X, she's going to have her way of doing things. And when you work with partner Y, he's going to have his own way of doing things. And so you're going to have to learn how to do things the ways that these different partners do things. And when you start supervising and you're a partner, you get to decide how you want things. And so part of what we have to do is while we are creating our own selves and our own style, we have to be able to recognize the ways of working of the people that we work with so that we can give them what meets their expectations. Now, there's a second level that you can take this to, and I particularly like this one. This is where you go back to the partner, maybe outside of a specific work project, and you say, here is what I want to accomplish this year. I want to get better at X. At one stage in my career, I said, hey, I have the science background. I started as an electrical engineering major. I moved to the United States, blah, 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 blah. I have minors in physics and chemistry. I miss the sciences. I want to carve out a niche on these large MDL litigation things that we're on with working with science experts. Do you think that's something you can help me with? So what you're doing is you're recruiting them in being invested in helping you get the right opportunities, in giving you feedback on specific things. And so you can reach out to them and recruit them to become a strategic advisor in the areas that you want to improve and the areas that you want to grow. Now, if you do this, you also have to be accountable. You have to let them know how you're doing. If I tell a partner that part of what I want to do as part of my business development, I don't really like writing these law review style articles, which was true for me. And if the whole point of this was you wanted us to be out there and be visible and be thought leaders, then I would rather do presentations and CLEs. So then now I will be keeping that partner up to date on what I'm doing and how I'm doing, because that makes them feel as if the time that you've invested or the time that they have invested with you is worthwhile. And you can do this with your work product. You can do this with any area that you are trying to grow in. Make the person giving you feedback an advisor. Now, the next strategy really has to do with situations where they're broad. And this is where the cultural differences that Michelle has pops in. And so I'll give you an example, and this is a real life example. Actually, I'll make it Michelle, but it's a real life example. So Michelle is now a senior associate. She's just a few years off, and maybe she's working with a new team. Maybe she's now working with an even more influential partner. And she gets feedback that she can't quite understand what's being said. For example, Michelle needs to work on her confidence skills. Or Michelle needs to be more assertive. Or sometimes it appears that Michelle is not as prepared or even interested in what we're working on. And I'm not sure that she's committed to this kind of litigation. Okay? Now, what has happened is you've been given feedback that is conclusory. What you haven't been given is an explanation of what the feedback giver means. You also don't know the circumstances they're talking about. So what you can do is seek to clarify as much as possible. Now, understand that with this technique and this strategy, some people are more willing to engage than others. Some people are more responsive to questions. And so you get that feedback and you can go ahead and immediately say, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. It's very important to me that I do a good job. Can you give me an example of a time that you did not see me as confident? Can you give me an example of a time that you thought I should have shown more initiative? Now, the partner has two responses, and it doesn't have to be a partner. It could be a supervising attorney. It could be a senior associate. It could be anybody in your organization. This is not law firm specific. People generally act in two ways. Some people react defensively, like you should know. And the fact that you don't know tells me how clueless you are. Other people will recognize, oh, that was broad. Yes, I can give you an example. Now, ideally, this is when you're receiving feedback verbally and in the moment. Ideally, this is not happening in a final evaluation when big decisions have to be made. Okay? So you seek to clarify, you seek to ask questions, and continue to ask questions. I think that you don't show interest because when we're in these meetings, you don't speak. Oh, thank you for letting me know that. Part of why I don't speak is because you can give an example. Now, the truth is, if your leader was inclusive and your leader was culturally competent, your leader would know that introverts and extroverts are going to react differently in team meetings, that people from differential cultures are going to react differently in team meetings. And then you can make a commitment. You can say, I generally tend not to talk a lot in these meetings because there are a lot of people talking, but I'm going to make a commitment to speak up more because I always come prepared. And as you know, I'm interested in X, Y, Z, and I've even been researching some of those topics. So you have to seek the clarification that you need because sometimes it's not given voluntarily. And you also have to be willing to keep asking and asking and asking. Think of it as the layers of whys that you have to ask. But be careful about how you do it so you don't come off confrontational, which of course is another webinar. Now use translators. This is where cultural difference is coming. When you look at cultural dimensions, one of those is between direct and indirect feedback, or indirect and direct communication. So there are cultures where people are pretty direct about what they need and what they want. Generally, those cultures have a lot of diversity where the underlying norms may not necessarily be the same. And so people are more direct in how they speak or in what they say. And then there are other cultures where a lot of the norms within that culture are somewhat understood. And so people say things very indirectly and folks kind of know what they're saying. And so someone could say something to you and you know that what they're saying is, no, I'm not coming. Whereas somebody from a direct culture will not understand that. They would have heard, oh, you're thinking about it and you're going to look at this and you will get back to them to let them know whether you can do it. Okay? Now, one example that I often give is a conversation between my mother-in-law and I. Now, mind you, I had been with my husband 6 years when this conversation happened. We're out shopping. I see some plates that I like that I've been talking about for a while, but I had been trying to price match. So I was looking for those plates from a different buyer to match the quality, but not pay the Pottery Barn prices, basically is what I was trying to do. So I show her these plates and she says to me, oh, that's different. And of course, I grew up in a direct culture and we are more direct in our communication. We don't mean anything bad about it, but if you ask me something, I'll give you a straight answer. And so she said, that's different. My mother-in-law is from Iowa. My husband is Iowegian. And I said to her excitedly, yes, it's different. Because I'm thinking different, unique. Because it's so unique, that's why I like it. And she looks at me and she smiles and she pauses. She puts her hand on my arm. She says, oh, honey, when I say it's different, what I mean is I don't like it. Now, my first thought was, whoa, how many times has this woman said some version of it's different? And I heard this is different when she meant I don't like this. Okay? And that happens in our workplaces a lot. People will give feedback and you don't really understand what it means. Or you take it literally and they mean something else. Sometimes you need decoding because some of the feedback we get is based on bias. Okay? Now, we're not going to unpack the bias part of this until the next session, but the truth is you may need to reach out to people from your affinity group or people who are close or have knowledge about this person to decode what they mean, because some people are simply not good at telling you what you need to know across differences. They're not good at recognizing, oh, we've got a little bit of a difference here. I need to give more information to this person, or I need to adjust how I am presenting this information. And you also have a responsibility to improve and increase your cultural competency skills so that when somebody's speaking indirectly to you, a flag goes up and you seek clarification. Okay? So some of the things that I've heard people be told, oh, well, she's kind of intimidating. Maybe you get your affinity group to help you decode that. Yeah, Michelle's a Black woman. A lot of people in this culture, in our organization, we've heard this before. When a Black woman is firm or perhaps even willing to exercise some authority, she's not confident when interacting with clients. That can also be code. If you've sought to clarify, if you've sought to get more information and you still don't have it, somebody may be able to decode it for you. Well, in this culture, they kind of value people who speak up first. They value people who don't necessarily raise their hands in meetings, but who throw out their ideas and think them out. And you're just not that kind of person because it's just not who you are as a person. And it's also not part of your cultural heritage. I've heard this commonly. I remember one organization where almost every Black woman or male who was confident and who was sort of excellent at what they did and knew it, the word used was arrogant. I never heard that word used for white men. You may need somebody to help you decode what that is and what it means for you. Knowledge is power. And so the last thing I'm going to end with in terms of strategies is more of a mindset. We have to remember that we are responsible for the energy that we bring into the room. The work always starts with us, whether it's in recognizing and mitigating bias, whether it's becoming culturally fluent, whether it's making the commitment to have a growth mindset to learn, whether it's being willing to accept feedback, whether it's being willing to look at feedback as a gift, right? Because feedback is a gift in the sense that it gives you information that can help you determine what you're going to do next and how you're going to go about your next steps. And ultimately, if you have a goal that you're trying to achieve, and these people around you impact that goal, and they have the information and they have the opportunities for you to achieve that goal, feedback is a gift. So the mindset that we bring, having a spirit of generosity to say, I'm going to ask questions instead of assume. I'm going to put aside what my initial gut reaction is, because it may be based on my culture, my bias, my experience, my upbringing, and I'm going to ask questions about what they really mean or what it is that they want from me. We have to be willing to offer generosity to people, to not impute malice or ill intent to them in our reactions, interreactions. Now, that's not to say we give people an endless pass, because there are times you will work with people and you will get to the point where you've done all the things that you can and very little has changed, or they have shown you a part of their person and their integrity or character that it is just what it is. But if we come into situations offering grace and generosity, offering grace, the idea that, you know, this was said X way, but let's explore because maybe that's not what was meant. We allow ourselves to get so much more from our environment, and we allow ourselves for people to be more willing to give us information, because one of the worst things that can happen to us as professionals is when people stop giving you feedback because you don't receive it and you don't have the right mindset. So I've gone a little bit over, and I would like to take questions. So, and I need to, before I do that, I need to give you the code. The code for today's session is SS7769. I'll repeat that again, SS, and it's S like in Sam, 7769. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are materials on the platform for you to use if you want CLE credit. But in addition, after this webinar is over, everybody who's been registered for the webinar will get an email with the forms that need to be filled out and the written materials. So again, if you want CLE credit, the code is SS7769. All right, so I am going to go to questions. and see if I have any questions. Or Jenny, do you have any questions for me? Anybody?
Corey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So we do not currently have questions in the chat box, but perhaps people don't know how to ask the question. So please, if you would like to ask Corey a question, you can put it in the chat box, the Q&A box, sorry. And you can send those, if you drop down the to field to the presenter, those will go directly to Corey, or you can also choose panelist and I will see them as well. So we'll pause for a moment and give you an opportunity to ask a question.
Thanks, Jenny, and I apologize. I should have said that in the beginning. I'm a novice at this, forgive me.
Corey, Ashley is asking you to repeat the CLE code, please.
Yes. S as in Sam, 7769. Okay. What are good tools for attorneys to use to discern between, oh, that moved.
Can you scroll to it?
Yes. I can be smarter than the laptop. Yes. Okay. What are good tools for attorneys to use to discern between a situation where there's a negative story we're telling ourselves versus when the other person truly is judging us from a place of bias? That's an excellent question. So on that slide, one of the things that I said is, what are the stories you are telling yourself? Now, this comes from Brene Brown's work. And she's a psychologist, a social scientist, researcher, professor, best-selling author, TED Talk, all of the good stuff. And one of the things that she talks about in her work is the fact that as humans, we will fill in and we will make stories. Now, some of the questions that we have to be aware of in discerning between whether something's real bias or not is really asking yourself, why do I think this, right? So I've decided this partner doesn't really like me. Why do I think that? Well, because when I went to talk to them the other day, they were abrupt and, they pretty much pushed me out of the room. Okay. Why could they have been doing that? So you want to ask yourself a bunch of questions. You want to try to remove yourself from the situation, which is very hard because when you're in the bottle jar, it's hard to read the label because you're in the jar, but you want to try as much as possible to come out of it and ask yourself questions. And you want to be as objective as possible. Well, it could be they were tired. It could be they had something going on in their family. You come back to generosity. You give the person another chance. But we also have to pay attention to the words that people use because there are words that people use that give us very clear indications. Whether they know it's biased or not, there are certain indicators of bias. You want to use others that are trusted advisors. Now, be very careful about who you ask for information. When you have people in the workplace who have a track record, for example, of having issues with women or having issues with people of color, there's a story. And a lot of times when you start trying to put pieces together and ask yourself, well, is it me? Is it the situation? Or is it the other person? You'll find out if people have a track record. But watch how you are treated versus how other people are treated and see if you can draw comparisons. I generally don't advise people to compare their experiences with others. It can lead to problems. It leads to envy or superiority. But I do believe in comparing when you're trying to figure out where you are and how you're being treated, okay? At the clarify step, what's the approach when someone takes the posture that you're clueless for asking? So this is where having some knowledge about this person may be good. If you're working with someone who's the kind of person who thinks, that's a stupid question, you may not want to seek to clarify with them. Another thing that you can do is seek to show what you've done to try to understand before you ask for clarification, just like you do with your work product. People who supervise, we don't like it when people come to us and ask us questions on stuff that they could have at least done some research and started with, I did this research, this is what I found, but I'm having trouble with this. Can you help me with this? Because now I know you've invested some time. And do the same thing with the clarification. Show your willingness to learn, but also show the fact that you do understand this, but this you don't get. Like, okay, when you say this, it could mean this situation, it could mean this situation, it could mean this situation, or it could even mean something else, and I'm not sure which it is. Can you help me understand which it is? But use emotional intelligence, because there's some people, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I'll say, there's some people you just need to find a way to not work with them anymore if you can. How does the added layer of COVID add to the ability to navigate feedback virtually? It amplifies it because you're not in the office. There's something about being face-to-face with someone that makes it harder for them to be jerks. There's something about technology in between us that we sometimes forget that we're interacting with humans. Also, there's something when you can't hear someone's voice or see their face that doesn't allow you to tell the tone. And what often happens is we impute tone. Let's face it, written communications, unless someone's out really nasty, don't have a tone. But yet we read things with tone. And so that added layer that we don't get to see each other, that I don't get to build in opportunities to visit with you and talk with you and get to know you better, become harder. And so we have to be more intentional about communicating frequently. We have to be more intentional about being visible to the partner. We have to be more intentional about using phone calls, even when people are zoomed out. So that would be another example. We are over time technically. And so I do want to wrap up. And I'm looking here and I see that we have more questions. I see one, I see two. So Jenny, what do you recommend I do? Should I write some tips that we send out in an email when we respond, or do I table this for the next webinar and we start off with answering these questions?
I think that we should start up the next one with these questions.
Perfect. So we're going to follow up with this discussion. We're going to focus on the systemic issues and individual bias issues and get more specific about that. That session will be 1 hour, so we have time to dig deeper. I'm going to take these remaining questions that haven't been answered about introverts who may be struggling due this time and the pandemic and people being overwhelmed, and we will start the next webinar with that information. It will be June 3rd, same time, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. Get your CLE credit, SS7769. Thank you for coming to this very first webinar. And if you have suggestions of topics that we should do, send them to us, belonging@sciparth.com. Thank you.